Well, Nick, great to catch up with you on day one. Incredible to see the fans back. Number one, 53,000 day and night session. The place was absolutely heaving today. Once we actually got everyone through the gates, which I know there are a few issues which the USTA will look to, certainly fix up for tomorrow and these COVID times that we're in. But how good was it to see crowds back at the US Open?
Incredible, Brett. It was, almost sort of felt like last year. Obviously, today was a day that kind of made up for last year a little bit in terms of lost time. The quality of the matches on Ash today, the length of the matches on Ash today in the day session. We had a 6 in the third, we had a 5-setter. The atmosphere just behind me here or throughout the day on the grounds was absolutely buzzing. It was packed on the outside courts. It was a very New York day, a very New York summer's day. It was humid. Even now, it's, you can feel how sticky it is out here now, and hot testing conditions for the players. We saw a lot of players really suffering deep in third and fourth set matches. So a very typical New York day one US Open. And it was, it's very good to be back, I have to say.
Yeah, no doubt. I am jealous sitting all the way back here in Melbourne. Let me tell you. Now, you talked about those couple of big matches on Arthur Ashe. So let's talk about the match that I suppose has made the most headlines from the day, Andy Murray and Stefanos Tsitsipas. So the man who's the pro-vaxxer, and then there's the anti-vaxxer. There's a bit of feeling in this one, and it was some vintage Andy Murray, certainly at the start. And you've got to love this guy. I mean, you live in the part of the world where he's from, and he's just an incredible competitor who wants to bow out on his terms whenever that will be, Nick. And here he is. He leads 2-1. Stefanos takes a bathroom break. It's a contentious point in tennis about these long breaks, and Stefanos having a little bit of history in this area, and that seemed to have Andy fuming for the rest of the match. Stefanos wins in 5. It wasn't an overly courteous handshake at the end, and Andy was pretty upset about it. He's been impressed. I mean, he's effectively, I suppose, accused Stefanos of cheating. What did you make of it all?
I mean, it's been building, isn't it? I think with Tsitsipas to an extent, as you mentioned in the summer, Toronto was, I think the average break he took in Toronto was something like 8 minutes, Brett, over the course of the 3 or 4 matches he played in Canada. So, there were certainly some suggestions that was too long, that the break was too long. The issue here in New York with the Arthur Ashe is that the bathroom is literally 20 yards off the court. They walk off the court on Ashe, and it's there. So there really is no excuse for it to be any longer than it necessarily is. Now, the big question is, what does necessarily is? How do you define what necessarily is with a bathroom break? Because that's obviously a very difficult one to police. There's no doubt that professional tennis has to look to try and infiltrate and produce some sort of guidelines, some sort of rules as to how long this takes, because it is getting a little out of hand. Players are taking too long. It is humid here today. That's the one thing I will say. Yeah. So from that perspective, a change of outfit is required, but it shouldn't take as long as it did. Murray clearly took offense to it. He used it as fuel, to be honest. I thought for quite a large part of the fifth, in typical Murray fashion, he kind of tried to amp himself up and kind of feel that he could use that energy. But it was just a little unnecessary, just the length of the break more than anything else, Brett. It got under Murray's skin. We saw him talk to the chair umpire, Nico Elworth. One lot he can do. His hands are tied. There is no rule. Until they crack down on the time limit, put a time limit on it, players are going to continue to try and take advantage of that particular rule and that particular kind of loophole, if you like. And we can talk about it all day long, but it's not going to change unless there is some sort of crackdown. It's a hard one. I was talking to Mark Knowles about it on air, and it's a difficult one. And we went to supervisors here, and again, there's simply no official line as to where it is. So is he crossing it? From our perspective, it feels like he is, but at the same time, he's not crossing the rule line because there is no rule there. So it needs to be looked at, Brett.
No doubt. I think there needs to be a clock of sorts put on it. Otherwise, players can just really stretch what is deemed as fair. And he's got a little bit of history now. But anyway, that for the aficionados to work out. Naomi Osaka, you've watched her. I mean, so much intrigue about just the way her years unfolded with everything that's happened across the European summer and not playing the French and Wimbledon, her issues with the media. But she returns to a place where she seems to feel quite serene and comfortable. She's won the US Open twice, a home crowd behind her. It's always hard to sort of get inside the head and understand what is going on with Naomi. But look, tonight pushed in the first set, very good second set. How did you see the performance, and just what was your observations of her, just her demeanour and the way she went about it?
I think it's an element of home comforts here, Brett, definitely for her. She was born and bred just a few miles away. As she said, she spent much of her, formative years in this part of the world, so very comfortable. Very comfortable on this court. No doubt her movement and her ball striking was at times good tonight. Where it needed to, is it where it needs to be to win a major? It's going to get better. It's going to get better for sure. I think she played the big points well. That's crucial. She served well in particular on the big points, playing an opponent who didn't really have a lot in terms of weight of shot to trouble her. So from that regard, it was a fairly comfortable matchup. Wasn't really under too much pressure. I think it was a decent start. It's a case of building herself into the draw. As you said, she hasn't had a lot of matches, but one thing she has had is the feel-good factor is very high when she steps on Arthur Ashe. Conditions are pretty quick here. That helps to serve, obviously. Movement looked good coming out of the corners. And I thought she looked fairly relaxed, to be honest. And, so much attention on her, I don't think I can remember, certainly not a tennis player who's had the spotlight on her quite like Naomi has over the last few months for various reasons. But I thought she looked good. I thought she looked optimistic, pretty positive about life. And that has to bode well.
No doubt. And just a quick sort of look ahead. I mean, from our perspective, Ash Barty is a huge storyline. She seems to be in the best nick of giving herself the opportunity to win the US Open compared to previous years, her body of work this year. So Naomi and Sabalenka, who have both had wins tonight, nipping at her heels. So it comes down to her execution, and she's got Vera Zvonareva, who's a long way from being where she was a decade ago, world number 2 and making a couple of major finals, but still, a terrific competitor, as all the Russian players are. And then there's the story of Novak trying to win the calendar slam, dealing with Holger Rune. What a year he's had, former world junior number 1, who's into his first major. He's rising, you would think, inside the top 100 at some point behind young Carlos Alcaraz. But they're the two big storylines, certainly, of the next fortnight.
Unquestionably. I mean, what Novak obviously is trying to achieve here is pretty special. And there's a feeling around here that, in many ways, I feel like just being here, it's probably not being talked about enough, in terms of having won the first 3. No one's won the first 3 since 1969 either. So, it's not like that's an achievement not to be sniffed at in itself.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Olympics was a disappointment for him. This is a chance to reset. Courts are very quick here, Brett. All the players are talking about how quick the courts are. That bodes well for Djokovic as well. That kind of plays into his hands because that's going to add a little bit more to the serve. We know how much of improvement he's made in the serve. The return's always going to be good. I think that, that's would seem like a nice fit for him in terms of the court surface. He's the best hard court player of all time, Brett. So everything points towards for him it going well. Of course, there are challenges. We know that. Medvedev and Zverev in particular, I think, are going to be the 2 biggest challenges for him. Physically, I guess, for me, that's the only real question for Djokovic. Physically, is he going to be, again, okay for another couple of weeks here? No one really quite knows how much the French and Wimbledon took out of him overall because he doesn't give too much away. So that's, for me, is the only question mark for Djokovic. Physically, is he going to be okay here? If it gets hot, it's going to be tough. He's going to be tested. And is the body going to hold up? We know he's had some injuries as well. So time will tell. Time will tell. I think for Ash, again, couldn't come here in a better place, could she? Everything seems to be on the outside, currently from the outside looking in a great place. Having won in Cincy, obviously, where conditions are pretty similar to here. And again, you've got to like the court surface for her. This is going to take the slice beautifully. This is a low bouncing, fast hard court. This is what it used to be back in the old days. So I think conditions will most certainly suit her game. And, we'll see how she goes tomorrow.